What I mean is I realized that in America, Jews, Christians, and the Muslims speak the same language, English, and they live in the same civic sphere. They shop in the same shopping centers, vote in the same elections. And because of the common civic language, they can talk about their differences in religion and theology. But here in Israel, I began to realize we don't have that common language. We don't have any common basis. Why am I trying to establish a framework for religious dialogue? Hanan first established a framework for human dialogue.
That was Rav Hanan Schlesinger discussing the song It's Late at the Bar, which Liz Hanellin and I wrote after being inspired by Psalm 30. I'm Shep Rosenman. This is The Rest is Commentary, where we discuss what songs inspired by the Psalms, or Tehillim, inspire in my guests. Rabbi Schlesinger is an Orthodox rabbi living in Alon Shvut, Israel, which is part of Judea and Samaria, or Yehuda v'Shomron, and is one of the founders of Roots-Shorashim-Judur, the Palestinian-Israeli grassroots initiative for understanding, nonviolence, and transformation. Currently, he serves as its Director of International Relations. Rav Hanan frequently speaks in the USA together with one of his Palestinian partners about the amazing work that Roots is doing in Judea-Palestine. Prior to founding Roots, Rav Hanan spent his career teaching Jewish studies in various seminaries, colleges, and frameworks in the Jerusalem area, among them the Pardes Institute, Beit Midrash Elul, Nishmat, and Yeshivat Bat Ayin. You can find out more about Rav Hanan at www.rav, R-A-V, Hanan, H-A-N as in Nancy, A-N as in Nancy.org. You can find out more about Roots, Shorashim-Judur, and its Israeli and Palestinian leaders by going to their website, www.friendsofroots.net. Rav Hanan and I will be talking about loyalty as a value, what to do when your values conflict, the founding stories of Roots-Shorashim-Judur, the sources of evil, introspection and repentance, the challenges of interfaith dialogue, Zionism and Jewish collective identity, fear and trust in daily life, and so much more. Let's start off by listening to It's Late at the Bar. It's late at the bar, the one just north of the harbor. Where the sea lions bark and the sawdust sleeps on the floor. Locals with margaritas and Mai Tai umbrellas. We're turning sadness into dancing in the garden next to the bar. We are who we are, dancing in the garden next to the bar. We're wearing flip-flops, Hawaiian shirts, and tank tops. Tan skin, Oxnard sun, scent of beer and peppermint schnapps. Alienation and quiet desperation. We're turning sadness into dancing in the garden next to the bar. We are who we are, dancing in the garden next to the bar. Weeping sometimes endures for a night, but joy comes back in the morning light. Everyone's welcome here. Everyone's welcome here. We've all taken root, do-gooder and empty suit. We see each other raise glasses, a silent salute. Our time in this place lifts us up with cheers and with grace. We're turning sadness into dancing in the garden next to the bar. We are who we are, dancing in the garden next to the bar. We are who we are, dancing in the garden next to the bar. Hello there. So nice to see you again.
I'm happy to be here.
Thanks so much for joining me. So, in the same way that I'm inspired to write songs by Prakim of Tehillim and by, in this case, also a prompt from my friend Timmy Reardon, I offer the songs as a gift in the same way that I feel I receive them to the friends and mentors in hopes that they inspire something in you. And so my question to you is, what, if anything, did It's Late at the Bar inspire in you?
Okay. First, let me give some introduction. I remember that in college, my literature teacher told me that with all the praises she sung of me, she said there's one issue, which is that I read literature like philosophy. And that hasn't changed. Now, I really don't know what literature is. I don't know what poetry is. Probably don't know what song is. I just read and I see philosophy. I see ideology. So if I read your song like philosophical tractate, hope someone will forgive me. First of all, you.
En vaya, not a problem at all.
There's a few things in the song that inspired me, that got me thinking about different things. There's one line there about alienation and quiet desperation. And the truth is that I couldn't trace it, but I'm sure I've heard that phrase, quiet desperation, before. I don't know where. I don't remember. Could it be in Shakespeare?
Yeah, not sure offhand. For me, I associate both Shakespeare and Rav Soloveitchik.
Got it. So I look at that phrase, alienation and quiet desperation, and I think of how so many of us in the modern era go through our lives seemingly okay externally, and inside there sometimes is a sense that this is not for me. I want to get out of here. I'm just on the treadmill, not going anywhere. And it's just so painful to think that there's so much pain beyond the veneer of everything's okay. But then as I kind of feel sorry for modern man, I said to myself, wait a second. At least all these people that we're talking about, and it sometimes includes me, have food on the table and shelter. What about all the people in the past and the present that don't live in the modern world, don't live in the industrialized countries? So many of them live lives not of quiet desperation, but of actually noisy desperation. If they really, there's just no hope in life. There's no safety. There's no food. There's no health. And I actually think that just two hours away by drive from where I am is Gaza, where 80% of the buildings have been flattened in the past year and a half. And everyone's a refugee. People living in tents, if they're living at all, babies are dying of exposure to the cold. There's just so much pain in the world. And it just doesn't have to be like that. A lot of it is self-inflicted. I mean, that human beings inflict upon themselves. And the Rambam in the Guide to the Plex talks about the three sources of evil. And he says, and this was already over 1,000 years ago, almost 1,000 years ago, that the most of the evil in the world is what people do to other people and to themselves.
Okay, well, so first of all, I think I did remember the quiet desperation line is from Thoreau. So that's probably the reference there. In fact, I'm sure it's the reference. But I want to contextualize this, even though I've read your bio to people. You're focusing on the pain in Gaza. You're not focusing on the pain in Israel.
Wow. My sense of justice and fairness really does override and sometimes erase my sense of loyalty. Like in a family context, let's say with a parent and a little kid, the kid does something wrong in school, or you go to a parent-teacher conference and you hear about your kid. There are some parents who will always defend their kids. And there are some parents who will try to look at the situation objectively and just listen to what the teacher has to say. So I'm in that second category. I remember that a while ago I saw concerning the very famous Reform rabbi in the Holocaust, Rabbi Leo Beck. And he talked about the fact that he was appointed by the Nazis to head one of those Jewish committees. And everyone's always asking him to save their child, save their relatives who was on the deportation list. And he always refused, even to save his own family. And he survived the war, and he was always uncertain if he did the right thing or not.
Mm-hmm.
And he writes after the war, when he was exiled to Britain, that he indeed stands behind that behavior, standing for justice and standing for fairness, and not necessarily showing loyalty to his own family. I'm sure there's many, many people, perhaps most people, would criticize him for that. But I have to say that it seems I was born like that.
Mm-hmm. So look, from where I sit here in Los Angeles, I don't know that there are right answers. There are the answers that we do. There are the philosophies that we take in our lives, and we implement them as best we can. Having heard you speak multiple times now about the conflict between Israel and Palestine, I don't know that I agree that you're lacking loyalty. You have loyalty, and it's not an either or. And you have loyalty to Israel, and you have loyalty to human values and empathy and things of that nature, where you can see the pain of both sides. You just didn't happen to mention it. I mean, I guess I'm giving you a way out here, right? Like, you don't need to paint yourself into a corner. And I think, honestly, the whole nature of your effort, from where I sit, and please tell me if you agree or disagree, is your ultimate goal is peace, not only for peace's sake, but for the sake of the long-term health of Israel and of Palestine, or of Israelis and Palestinians. And so to me, that's not a lack of empathy. That's, if you will, an overabundance of empathy that allows you to balance uncomfortable truths. Does that resonate for you?
Of course. I have so much to say here. Empathy is one thing, loyalty is something else. Justice is one thing, loyalty is something else. If we say that I or someone else has loyalty to justice or loyalty to empathy, for me, that's just a word game. There's a quality called loyalty in which people show greater concern to their own. It may be their family, it may be their clan, maybe their tribe, maybe their people.
Mm-hmm.
And objectively speaking, a lot of people criticize me for lacking that fundamental loyalty to Am Yisrael, to the Jewish people, and putting values like empathy for all human beings and justice and fairness over loyalty. So I plead guilty to that. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't love my people. It doesn't mean that I'm not a patriot. It doesn't mean that I don't feel a deep connection to Am Yisrael, to the Jewish people. But I have to admit that for me, justice and empathy for all human beings is a higher value than loyalty.
All right. So I now have a million things that I want to go over. First of all, you mentioned the Rambam before, Maimonides, a 12th century Spanish and Egyptian scholar, one of the greats in the Jewish tradition, and even not in the Jewish tradition. His formula for the giving of tzedakah comes to mind, in which he says, yes, give charity to everybody, but start locally and then expand from there. Locally meaning, and again, haven't looked at this in years, but I don't know if it means your family or geographic locality, or he leaves it open to interpretation, leaving that on the table for a moment. And simultaneously, I'm asking the question, so I think I'm bristling at the language that you feel guilty about this.
I don't know. I don't feel guilty at all.
You said you're guilty.
You're guilty
of this.
Of what people accuse me of not being a ultranationalist, of not being a super patriot.
So, okay, but that's the rub right there. Because my view of you is that you are an ultranationalist in the non-political, label of the word, right? You believe in Am Yisrael, right?
Of course.
You believe that there should be don't say of course. My sister believes in Am Yisrael, but not necessarily Eretz Yisrael qua the Zionist state. She believes in it. She lives there, but her political relationship to it, I think, is very different than yours. I think you give an argument to those who will freely label themselves ultra-nationalist by saying, I am guilty of not having loyalty. On the contrary, I think that you're loyal. You just have a different set of loyalties. I'm really just trying to drill down into what it is, right? It's not that you don't have loyalty. You do have loyalty, but your definition of what it means to be loyal is hafuch from theirs. For them, it's all about Israelis first. For you, it's humans first, and we have to find a way to get along so that Israel itself as a nation can thrive while the Palestinian people also thrive.
We're defining the word loyalty in different ways, but we're saying the same thing, you and I.
Okay.
Why do you insist on expanding the definition of the word loyalty? You say that I'm loyal to human beings. Why do you insist on that? Why can't you accept that loyalty is a quality of allegiance to a certain in-group, and some people have more of that, so people have less of that?
I again, not having read Haid's book, which I have written it down so that I will, but as you're describing the definition, I think loyalty and all these other qualities are not binary.
Of course. I do think that I'm defending Am Yisrael by criticizing Am Yisrael. I'm making us better at what we want to be and we're supposed to be.
Yeah, so that was my first thought, that we are, in fact, in a different way saying the same thing. We're just getting there in different places.
And I want to tell you also that in Roots, in our organizations, we haven't talked about yet, we have a list of something like 8 core values. And one of those 8 core values in Roots is national introspection.
So how does national introspection work in a world where people don't see what's in front of them necessarily as garbage that needs to be cleaned up? All right. So how do you manage that process?
You're right. And therefore, at the core of it is creating the circumstances in which people can see the garbage in their own backyard. The Jewish people and Israel are under attack. In a certain sense, we've been under attack forever. And since the beginning of the Zionist movement, let's say since 1929, if not before, we've been under attack here in the land of Israel. And apparently the natural reaction when you're under attack is to circle the wagons and to not give the enemy any ammunition, and to paint ourselves as wholly righteous, to paint ourselves as the forces of light against the forces of darkness, to strengthen the morale, right? Patriotism, to believe in our cause, sidkat derech, the righteousness of our path. Okay, so I believe in the righteousness of our path, right? I'm a Zionist, I'm a settler, I'm all that stuff. I'm a Jew. I made Aliyah. I came to the land of Israel when I was 20. I basically gave my life, my future to the Zionist movement. But I don't think that it's good for the Jewish people to only engage in patting ourselves on the back. I think that we have to see our flaws. And we have to admit that it's okay to see our flaws. It's okay. Some people call it airing dirty laundry in public. No, it's airing dirty laundry for our own good because we want to be better.
The idea of airing dirty laundry not being a thing we do, to me, is a very old modality. I feel like it's one of the reasons why we still have teachers, rabbis, administrators molest children, who abuse students and women verbally, sexually, whatever. And this is not only true, this isn't only a Jewish thing. It happens in the Jewish community too. But if you look at the Jewish community and the breakdown, you'll see that there's statistically less of it in certain sectors. Why? Because nobody's reporting it in those sectors, but it's happening.
Shep, I agree with you 100%. And you know in which sectors they're not reporting it? In the more conservative sectors that have more loyalty to the in-group.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, but for me, like, I'm someone I self-describe as, take your pick, Rockefeller Republican or old school liberal. They're kind of the same thing. It's conservative on foreign policy. This is American conservatism rather than Israel. Conservative on foreign policy, specifically in part influenced by the whole Israel piece of the equation. And this one really gets me into trouble. Conservative on economic policy, but I'm also socially liberal. And those three pieces often don't align. It's a complicated structure. And I think that this ties into why probably I bristled at Haid's definition of loyalty, because I think it's always more complex than that. And I think that people do make that choice to take care of their own, but in so doing, they're not taking care of their own. They're taking care of a person, or they're hiding shame and sweeping it under the rug because they don't want to admit to these problems. And for me, like, the healthy way of managing any process that requires change, and by the way, I think what's going on in Israel requires change, because sure, we can continue mowing the lawn as Netanyahu has been doing for 20 years, but it's not sustainable to do this forever, because tens of thousands of people lose their lives, including Israelis, including Israeli soldiers, not just Palestinians. So it's not, in my view, a sustainable approach. At some point, we need to figure out how to make change. And the only way to create change is to go through that process of tshuva that you described. First, acknowledge the wrong. Okay, there's something wrong here. I'm not saying that Israel is behaving badly or that Palestinians are behaving badly intentionally. There's something wrong here. Commit not to do the wrong again. Each side has wrongs that they could not do again. And then behave that way. That's the problem, because we can't control the extremes on either end of the spectrum. And so again, it comes back to my question, how do you manage that? It seems that you're taking a water on the rock approach by having conversations and encountering others as humans and hoping that in time that will impact generations. Is that an accurate description of the strategy?
The strategy of Roots cannot be seen in a vacuum. We work on the grassroots level. We work from the bottom up. We work changing, transforming hearts and minds one person at a time, Israeli and Palestinian. And indeed, that is very slow, but it's clear to us that that's not enough. What we do is necessary, but not sufficient. There has to be also movement on the political level from the top down. And today that's not happening. Not as in not happening, but it's the opposite is happening. So our work today, our work in Roots, is temporarily ineffective. It's preparing the groundwork, but it's not going to be part of the change until there's work from the top down. And then there'll be a symbiotic relationship between the work on the bottom and the work on the top.
Right.
And each will feed into the other and encourage the other. So at the moment, what we're doing is we're providing an example of what could and should be.
Right. And that's why I think, for me, you get kudos for sticking with it, notwithstanding the political climate sending the country in another direction, because you're taking the long-term view. Again, it's about the big picture, the long-term view, not what's going on in the ground in the moment. But you said you work with both Israelis and Palestinians. And I completely agree with your philosophy of personal responsibility. I'm going to take care of my own garbage. I'm going to try to impact the garbage of my neighbors and influence them. My neighbors, qua Israeli settlers. Have you done studies of two-part question. Have you done studies of the numbers of Israelis you've impacted versus Palestinians you've impacted, A, and B, have you looked at the generational impact? So you've influenced the parents of one generation. How has that changed the kids of the next generation?
Roots has been around now for 11 years. We had all the plans in place to begin a study of our youth program when the war broke out. And everything's on hold.
Yeah.
So clearly, yes, there has to be measurement and evaluation. All we have today is anecdotal evidence.
But anecdotal evidence is always powerful. It's never complete, but it's powerful and influences the conversation. Is there talk about getting it back online, notwithstanding what's going on in the conflict now?
There's talk. Some of our people are still in Miluim, still in reserve duty. On the Israeli side. So it's still going to take a while. I don't know how long. But yes, that has to be done.
So would you mind telling the story of how Roots came to be 11 or 12 years ago, whenever it actually started?
We were founded by a number of people, myself being one of them. A lot of different currents came together in the founding of Roots. So it's very interesting that if you ask 4 different people about the founding of Roots, each one has a different story and they're all true. And by the way, the fact that in our founding, there are different stories and they're all true is actually a metaphor to the work we do, that we bring together different stories that people think are contradictory and they actually are all true.
Right. That's beautiful.
There was Rabbi Menachem Fruman, may his memory be a blessing, and his family. Rabbi Menachem Fruman, you can say, was the first settler peace activist. He was a very, very charismatic figure, an iconic figure. He had a lot of followers and a lot of non-followers, a lot of enemies. He died now 12 years ago, and his followers and his family were searching for a way to continue his work and his legacy. And at the founding meeting of Roots, the family and followers were at least 70% of the people there. So that's one part of it. Another part of it is that one of Rav Menachem's followers, or 2 of them actually, one Palestinian, one Israeli, had been planning 13 years ago and 12 years ago to create a joint organic farm called Heaven's Field. And they had land and it didn't work out. So here was an Israeli and Palestinian who were ready to do a project, and the direction they wanted to go in couldn't go forward. And then the third part of it is me. So very briefly, my story is that from about 2005 to 2013, I was on shlichut. I was sent by the Jewish community to Dallas, Texas, as a teacher, as a scholar in residence, as a rabbi. And as part of the work I did there as a Jewish educator for congregants and especially also for rabbis, I got involved in interfaith work. First, it was working with evangelical Christian Zionists. And then from there, it expanded to Christians who weren't Zionists, then expanded to Muslims. I created an organization called Faiths in Conversation. And once a month for about 5 years, we had theological dialogues. Myself, a pastor, and an imam. We picked a topic and we spoke in front of 30 or 150 people in the rotating houses of worship on different issues, whether it's homosexuality, whether it's peace, whether it's economic issues, charity, whatever, the place of women in religion, spirituality, God. And those dialogues were so powerful to me that I decided when I came back home to Israel in 2013, I wanted to create a framework for dialogue like that for interfaith dialogue here. So I started to meet clergymen, Muslim and Christian. And at a certain point, I realized that near the end of 2013 that I was going in the wrong direction. What I mean is I realized that in America, Jews, Christians, and the Muslims speak the same language, English, and they live in the same civic sphere. They shop in the same shopping centers, vote in the same elections. And because of the common civic language, they can talk about their differences in religion and theology. But here in Israel, I began to realize we don't have that common language. We don't have any common basis. Why am I trying to establish a framework for religious dialogue? Hanan first established a framework for human dialogue. I realized then I didn't know any Palestinians. I didn't have any idea who they were. And I didn't even know that I didn't know until I had this revelation that I just talked about. So here's a story that happened to me as I was going through this process of waking up and realizing that I don't know the people who I live among. By the way, Palestinians are 80% of the population where I live in Judea, south of Jerusalem. So I was driving in my car one day, probably the end of 2013. I had two evangelical pastors from the U.S. in the car. They were my guests. They had come to the Holy Land to see how biblical prophecy is being fulfilled. Zechariah, Jeremiah, Isaiah. They asked me to show it to them. So I drove them around and I showed them the roads we paved and the forests we planted and the buildings, the settlements, the institutions, the shivot that we've created. And as we're driving, I saw a hitchhiker on the side of the road. I picked them up. And a few minutes later, I picked up another hitchhiker. We drove. The two young hitchhikers asked out of the car. I let them off. And when we started to drive again, one of the pastors, he said to me, Hanan, you just did a great thing. You taught us a lesson in Jewish ethics. That's fantastic. No one does that in Texas. No one picks up hitchhikers in Texas, he said. So I responded and said, Bob, his name was Bob Roberts. It's not just me around here. We all pick up hitchhikers. We have a common vision. We trust each other. And just like everyone else, I do my best to pick up every person who puts out his finger for a ride. And by the time I finished that sentence, I realized that I was lying. I was lying to Bob and Kevin. Even worse, I was lying to myself. I really believed what I said, that I try to pick up every person. But it's not true. I tried to pick up every Jew.
Right.
But at that point, when I said what I said, I really didn't know. I really didn't see that there was anyone I didn't pick up. I didn't see the Palestinians. They didn't exist. Mm-hmm. They were transparent. Right? There's a line in your song that says, they see each other. So we Israelis here in Judea and Samaria, and I think it's true for most Israelis, although not all, we don't see the Palestinians. We are blind. The Palestinians are like the gray, drab scenery that passes in the background of the movie, the Jewish movie. They're not part of the plot. You could ignore them, and we do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
In other words, we Jews, we Israelis, by and large, live as if in this land between the river and the sea, there is only one story. There's the Jewish story. There's the Zionist story. There's our story, and there is no other story. Any claim that there's another story in this land, we say is fabricated because we have tunnel vision. We only have room for one story in our hearts. And I began to realize after that ride in the car that I can't live like this, that I am blind, which is a moral blemish. If there's people I don't see, that there's a word for that. It's called bigotry. And you have to fix it. You, Hanan, have to fix it. And that's when I took upon myself to find a way to turn the Palestinians into human beings in my eyes. And it was clear to me the way to do it is to meet them. And that desire of mine to meet Palestinians brought me eventually to a meeting with the students of Rabbi Nachum Fruman and with that Israeli and Palestinian that wanted to found Heaven's Field. We got together with a different Protestant pastor from the U.S., by the way, the last Wednesday of January 2014 in a little Palestinian field, 20-minute walk from my home. And it turns out, retrospectively, that was the founding meeting of Roots.
Wow. That's an amazing story. You speak in the present tense. You tell the story in the present tense, but do you still not see Palestinians when you're kind of on the side of the road? Are they still gray and in the background for you? It doesn't seem like it.
I absolutely see them in a fashion that I didn't see them 11 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 9 years ago, or 8 years ago. In other words, my seeing develops every year.
Mm-hmm.
But it's clear to me that I'm still a bigot in certain ways. I just am aware of my bigotry and I'm chipping away at it, but I still have lots of levels in which I don't fully connect to the humanity of the other.
Is that hard? Like, do you give yourself a hard time about it? Or do you live with it?
I'm a human being. I live with it. I know that to a large degree, we can never completely overcome our bigotries and our stereotypes and our preconceived notions and our judgments, whether it's our judgments about the other on this side of the railroad tracks or our spouses or our children or our friends. We all have these judgments. What we can do is be aware of them and separate ourselves from it and look at them. Look how I was just a bigot 2 minutes ago. That's really interesting. What does that tell me about myself? And how can I, if not change it, how can I act better while I still have those deep notions that I can't change?
Sure. So I am blessed, and my wife sometimes says cursed, with being like my mother. I'll talk to anyone anywhere. Like, I don't care. The grocer, the guy on the corner, even, if he's living in a tent, I'll engage them as human beings. And of course, that sometimes creates a fear of danger and sometimes actual danger. You used the example of hitchhiking as part of your revelation. So today, now that you see Palestinians, do you take on Palestinian hitchhikers, or is it too dangerous? And how do you manage that polarity?
Very good question. I've been asked that in the past. So I don't pick up Palestinian hitchhikers, with rare exceptions, obviously people I know. And sometimes I picked up Palestinian women, but not men. And it really, really pains me that I don't pick them up. And I am afraid. I absolutely am afraid. And I know that in most cases that fear is not justified, but in some cases it is justified. And it's just terrible. It's tragic that we have to live in that reality, that we're afraid of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, this is some place where it is, in fact, a binary. We each make the judgment of whether we can live with 1% fear or 90% fear in making a decision. And for many of us, I would say for most of us, we're going to, if there's a 10% to 20% risk, we're not going to take the chance. I mean, we don't do hitchhikers here, but kal vachomer or lahavdil, more appropriate, rather than an a fortiori, to distinguish by 1,000 differences when I'm engaging with the homeless person at the corner of whatever, Pico and Hauser. Like, there's potential danger there. Like, I have to think about it. And in that moment, because I don't talk to everyone really. I said everyone, but I mean, I'll talk to anyone unless I feel uncomfortable. I don't calculate what's the risk, what's the percentage. I just feel uncomfortable enough to say, I'm not going to make this decision right now. So the idea, especially given what's happened in Yehuda v'Shomron, which is Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, depending on what you want to call it. People have gotten hurt from that. So there's real risk. There's stories in the news that people have secondarily experienced, and some people experienced it directly because they were either the victims of people who were picked up, or they were the families of victims who were picked up. So there's real fear there. And ultimately, the palliative that I think you're suggesting is, okay, in safe spaces, whether it's Heaven's Field, I love that terminology. And by the way, I think that ties back to some of the language in the chapter of Tehillim that inspired the song. I'd have to go back and look at it. It's been a while. But it also ties back to the song itself, in that we want to create these safe spaces where we can see each other, and where we can turn mourning into dancing. And that language for me, it's so resonant, not only because of turning mourning into dancing isn't as impactful as hafachta mispedi lemacholi, because turning, is turning lahafoch? It's a turn. Oh, it's not quite as complete to me, because a turning, I'm turning this bottle. Not everyone will be able to see this, but I'm turning the bottle. But that's turning it around, but turning it upside down is hafuch. Like there's a level of upside downness where you're specifically taking your morning and saying, I'm going to dance. It's an opposite action that's so much more powerful to me. And I think that that's at the core of the Tehillim. And I personally, what's my connection to this particular parak of Tehillim? The Diaspora Yeshiva Band. Right? Their song, Hafachta Mispedi Limacholi. When I was a 10th grader, they came to my high school and they played at my high school. They're directly responsible for my love of combining Jewish text and Jewish music. Now, in my early songwriting career, I would take psukim. And on some level, I feel like there's hubris in not clinging to the psukim because, whether it was King David or Moshe or whoever else wrote these verses, they were pretty good at it. Like, who am I to change it? And the answer is, notwithstanding their brilliance that I see, not everyone can see it. So I have to find a way in that tells a related story. Mm-hmm. And for me, there's this sleazy little bar. I'm sorry, I shouldn't use that language. But it's a dingy little bar in Oxnard where we spend about half of our time. And Shari doesn't like that. Shari's my wife. Shari doesn't like to go there. But I've been there a couple of times, honestly, mostly to just kind of observe it, not so much to kind of immerse myself in it. But what I observed was a community of people who, even though they're very different, they really see each other and they hang out and they laugh and they're drinking at the beach. Now, it could be that it gets violent. It could be that there are arguments that happen. In the few times that I was there, I didn't see it. I saw a slice of heaven in that people were really connecting with each other, regardless of whether they were in a 3-piece suit or they were in a Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops. And that's the metaphor, which is why when you asked for different songs, I thought that you would connect to this one. I didn't have Heaven's Field in my mind specifically, but the concept.
Heaven's Field was the project that failed. It never got off the ground. What we create in Roots is not called Heaven's Field. It's rather called the Dignity Center.
But I just love that language, Heaven's Field. It's so evocative. It's evocative because, it's heavens, but it's a field in which things grow. It's natural. What's the technical term that you call it now? The dialogue center?
We call our center the Dignity Center.
Dignity Center, which is powerful on its own, but it's just, bechavod, with respect, it's so much less evocative, right? It doesn't spark your imagination as much as Heaven's Field does for me.
Yeah.
And now I want to write a song called Heaven's Field. And luckily next week is another Fearless Songwriting Week, and I want to give credit where credit is due. Far too late, but I'm giving it anyway. This song came out of a Fearless Songwriting Challenge. I participate in 4 to 6 of them a year, where you write a song a day for 7 days. And my writing partner on most of these is a woman named Liz Hanellin. And Liz and I just love writing together. We've started doing this again a few years ago. And for many of them, I'll send her a stream of consciousness and, I'll send her a square and she'll give me back a circle. It has elements of the square in it, but it's this kind of gorgeous, perfectly rounded circle. This happens not to be one of those. This happens to be one where I sent it to her and she said, the song's basically done. I just have a few little concerns. And honestly, her few little concerns made it so much better. This, to me, is like a prayer for Mashiach. And I think that that's what you do every day in Roots. You are praying for peace and for completion and wholeness in the human world and in the divine world. Mashiach is the Messiah. Sorry. Do you feel that in your work?
Well, I'm a little bit hesitant to use the language you used, because it has the danger of playing into the narrative that peace is only for the Messianic days, and we Jews will never, in this world, before the Messianic days, merit to live in peace. And therefore, Hanan, what are you wasting your time for? Live in the real world.
Yeah.
So I don't think whatever the Messianic age means or looks like, I don't think we have to wait for then in order to see our neighbors as full human beings and to recognize their identities and the fullness of who they are and to come to reconciliation.
Yeah. So I think that this is another reflection of our kind of different geographic and therefore political perspectives. For me, it's very easy for me to dismiss the argument of the Mashiachists who say, peace is not for our time. You're wasting your time, Hanan. For me, over here, comfortably in Los Angeles, Mashiach is only going to come if we follow the model. And it comes up daily. We're speaking on Hanukkah, right? So it comes up daily in our Hallel, I think it's 114, where there's a reference to Nachshon ben Aminadav. And Nachshon is, the word Nachshon means, yes, it means snake, but it also means the oracle. And so, now, for those who don't know, Nachshon ben Aminadav is a figure in the Bible. He's one of the princes. And when Moses and the Israelites are at the Red Sea, and they have the Red Sea in front of them and the Egyptians behind them, God basically says, okay, Moshe, split the waters, but nothing happens until Nachshon, according to the Midrash, not only steps into the water, but goes into the water up to his neck, showing faith that God will deliver on God's promise. And I think for me, sitting here comfortably in Los Angeles, it's very easy for me to give you this worldview of saying you are doing the work of Mashiach. I don't buy this nonsense that Mashiach's going to come from out there. I think that there's so much in the Nevi'im and in the Gemara that talks about how it's incumbent upon us to bring it. And that's why you have people in the old city trying to rebuild and make sacrifices happen on the Temple Mount. That's their own logic. We're going to bring it, but they're coming at it from this end and you're coming at it from this end. You're all doing that same work of trying to make this notion of peace happen today. In your case, with the recognition that, okay, there's not a lot of reality there in the moment, but I'm still going to choose to live in a world where dancing is possible.
Indeed.
Anyway, kol hakavod for you. Thank you for creating hope in me and in a whole host of people. Keep up the work. And when you are feeling frustrated and down by it, I hope you turn to It's Late at the Bar.
Fantastic.
And hopefully it'll give you a little bit of inspiration of continuing to turn mourning into dancing.
So let me tell you about how true it is what you just said. Myself and one of my Palestinian partners, we speak in front of many groups, both those that come to visit Israel-Palestine and also when we speak in America. And a lot of times seeing the hopeful, appreciative, inspired reactions of audiences to our presentation, we feel that we get our batteries recharged. Someone's listening. Someone thinks there's something to what we're saying. Someone is inspired, and that turns back and inspires us.
Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Rav Hanan for joining me, to Liz Hanellin for co-writing It's Late at the Bar with me, to Devin Schwartz and E. Rose for their help in producing this episode, and to Jessica Hannah Swedler for her help on social media. You can find It's Late at the Bar and all the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify and Apple. In the next episode of The Rest is Commentary, I will be talking with my friend, poet, author, composer, performer, Torah teacher, and more, Alicia Jo Rabins. We discuss blending Jewish texts and music, something dear to my heart, holding different identities, like being a klezmer punk musician while getting a doctoral thesis, how Alicia's Girls in Trouble project came about, finding individual meaning in Jewish practice, intimacy and mythic time, writing as a spiritual practice, songs as prayers and transformation, finding meaning and epic stories in everyday rituals. We also talk about so many other things. All of that was inspired by Alicia's thoughts after listening to Won't Go to Sleep, which is inspired by Psalm 18. Please join us.